Well, good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Dr. Coach Show. I'm your host, Dr. Coach Danny Pueblos, and today I have my good friend, registered dietitian, Angie Katzberg. How you doing today, Angie?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, living this life over here in Southern California. We were just talking about, differences of where I'm at and where you are, and you're enjoying some snow. I kind of wish I had some snow right now. It gets a little too hot over here sometimes, and I could use that snow. So I appreciate you coming on, though.
Yeah, I'm ready for vitamin D. Like, we're missing some warm sunshine. We get the sunshine, but it's not the same because it's still cold.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I'll bottle some up and send it your way. I promise. Okay. So
that sounds good. Usually comes from your direction. So
yeah, right. I wanted to bring you on because you and I have worked in the past, and you definitely have helped me, with my health journey and just kind of educating me on the types of foods I should be eating. And you, along with actually a former guest of the show, Tony Castillo, I know you guys have teamed up to help people, with their health journey. So I definitely appreciate you, what you helped me with, even just creating new habits of health, right? That's my main priority. Like I told you before, is I want to be here for the long haul for my family, for myself and my family. And it's just kind of learning, because I had a general understanding of nutrition, but you hear all this stuff on the internet, all this stuff on social media, and you don't know what to believe, what's fact and all this stuff. Right. So, I definitely gained a lot of knowledge. So, I wanted to bring you on here to kind of share you with everyone else, share all the knowledge that you have. So again, thank you for coming on. So yeah, I wanted to kind of start talking about what motivated you to get into this field.
That was a good reflection question for me, because it was a long time ago. I've been a registered dietitian for 22 years now. That dates me for sure, but it was a long time ago. So I was athletic in high school. I never played college sports, but I had a family who struggled with obesity. And so going to college, I knew that nutrition, and I was a dual major of nutrition and exercise science. And so as time went on, I dropped the exercise science part, and I was actually a senior in college before I even really came to realize that I have the option or the opportunity to become a registered dietitian. So I decided to go ahead with that route. That requires a 4-year, and I do want to specify like what a registered dietitian is. I want to differentiate.
Please do.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know.
No, a nutritionist or an influencer for sure. But I do have a 4-year degree that is science-based with nutrition. And then to become a registered dietitian at that time, you had to go on and do a supervised internship, which consisted of 1,200 hours of supervised practice. Mine was also tied with a university. So I also received some master credits, but I did not get my master's degree. At the time, I was like, I'm done with school. I need a little bit of break. There was some time or some discussion around that time as far as going into nutrition as a master's degree, what it would really do for you. And again, at that time, I didn't know, what I wanted to do with that. But anyhow, I have the internship. Then you have to sit for a national exam. So kind of like your boards, right? And then once you pass that exam, you become a registered dietitian, and you can practice and do certain things with that license. So that all happened. I passed that exam in 2001, and immediately the other thing that happened in college is I fell in love, right? So I met my husband, and that was one thing too that deterred me from getting my master's, because I wanted to get married and start that whole process. But with that also took me back to the rural Midwest where I grew up, small towns. And so I actually did some consulting for a company there. But I would say my general background has been in clinical nutrition, working with patients, and kind of trying to figure out what best food is for them.
Got it. So how has that been for you? I know you've dabbled in different things. You've done your own thing, and that's another thing too that I know. And that's why I mentioned, like, please do talk about that, because a lot of people don't know as far as like what a legitimate professional looks like or what the qualifications are, right? Because you might, go to the gym and see someone who looks fit and say, oh, like, what do you do? And versus like going on YouTube or TikTok and, so they're getting information. So and that's why I tell people that you just be careful of where you're getting your information from. Even people that you go to the gym asking what they do, like, yeah, that might work for them, but it might not work for you, and so like knowing the right professionals in the field to go to is definitely important. Would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely, we're educators too. With that exam, we have to maintain our license too. So we have to have 75 hours every year of continuing education. So making sure we're on top of the most evidence-based practices. There is, I think, value in hearing other people's stories, right? And maybe what worked for them. But I also do think, our moms, our friends, they do have the best interest at our heart. But again, like you said, what maybe worked for them is not going to work for us. And when we try that, and then when we struggle with not getting the results that they did, then that leaves a whole nother mental aspect, which you can take care of that part of it. But definitely, ask questions and where their educational background is from. The thing with a registered dietitian is we do have an understanding of the biochemistry of our body. So, taking some random supplement that the gym guy, suggested you take, and then you have a bad reaction to it, could be one of those processes, right? Like it just did not work well with your biochemistry. And we all know supplements is a whole nother podcast episode, but definitely there is danger. And especially if you have a pre-existing condition, maybe you have a high blood pressure or high cholesterol or diabetes or something like that, only a registered dietitian should be giving you nutrition advice and treatments and such.
Sure. It's good to know. So if anyone's listening, you ever look into wanting to learn more about this registered dietitian, that's the way to go, right? So, and talk to my good friend here, Angie, about that. But looking back on your journey up until today, what would you say have been some like we'll start with this, some challenges for you as far as working with clients? I mean, some things that maybe you have to work against, like maybe we talked about a little bit as far as like misinformation, right? Or maybe stuff with clients that maybe a little bit more, stubborn or whatever. So like, what are some like common challenges or maybe notable challenges that you remember facing during your time as a registered dietitian?
Okay. Definitely, I think one of the biggest challenges from where I live is because we are rural. I've always lived in rural Nebraska. And so the opportunities for registered dietitians are far and few between. And even, 20 years ago, to get good nutrition information, we didn't have the internet. It was just kind of coming out 22 years ago. And so, we still kind of use encyclopedias too. So nutrition information, definitely the rural part. And that's what brought me actually to the virtual aspect of it. So telemedicine was kind of becoming popular when I left my corporate job to do this. So that has definitely been a challenge. And I think the addition of technology with telemedicine and Zoom and all these kinds of things has really helped that come to light. Now, some of those challenges, right, is social media. Like we are bombarded with messages, and, our fitness and exercise and nutrition industry is $1 billion, probably more than that industry. And people are just flooded and inundated with misinformation from people saying that, well, this worked for me, or, who knows where they're coming from. So definitely misinformation from social media.
Yeah, and that's why I love, and I'll definitely have you share like, where people can follow you so they can get the right information, right? Because it's with so many different avenues of information, whether it's the different social media platforms, YouTube, just internet, right? Like, and it's funny where the younger generation, they don't know, a world without the internet, right? Yeah. And it's when I'm teaching my classes, I talk to my students about having to do research, like going to the library, doing the doing the looking at the different books and checking out stuff. Like they're like, what is that? I never stepped foot in a library. So I'm like, yeah, like trust me, you guys have it easy. Like there's so many more resources available. But now the new challenge is to know what is legitimate and what's not, right?
Yeah.
There's so much out there. So you have, so much at the tips of your fingers, but now it's knowing, okay, what should I look at? What should I not? What should I put trust in and validity in versus what not to,
Yeah. Don't trust Dr. Google, right? And I'm guilty. Like I've Googled it myself too. I mean, that's the nice thing of it. I recently actually had some surgery myself, and I joined a Facebook group, and eventually I was like, I gotta get off this because this is not healthy, right? And what happened to her maybe will not happen to me. And I didn't need to go through that negative spiral or worry that was unnecessary. So definitely finding education, educators like ourselves, like again, looking at university, looking at websites in terms of .org, .edu, .gov. Those are usually well-researched sites. Looking at their about pages, so if you do end up on somebody's website, go to their about page and learn more about them. Where did they go to school? Do they have a license? What is that license? Because now there's all these kinds of nutrition certifications. Well, is that a 30-day, online test or questionnaire? Or, do they really have an education behind them? So those about pages on websites can be very helpful too.
Absolutely. So we talked about the challenges. Now I want to talk, about the stuff that wakes you up every single day and motivates you. And so like, what are some notable experiences, or like what gets you going? What are some like positive experiences you had, with their clients? And again, that drives you to, get going every single day and do what you do.
I think one thing that's really come to light, the older I get, is making those connections and really building relationships. So I think that gets me up and going. Like even, when you asked me to be on this podcast, I was like, oh my word, like, no, but at the same time, it's like, no, I know you, we've worked together and shouldn't be anything uncomfortable there. But I really have had experience with working, with people throughout the lifespan. And right now I spend a lot of my time with the youth. So I actually do work outside the home with our extension office, and I'm teaching nutrition classes from 3rd through 5th grade all the way through high school.
That's awesome.
So that I never saw myself in a classroom, right? Lesson planning, but that has also challenged me in ways that I never thought would help me grow, right? So again, using my creativity to somehow connect with these kids, right? And so again, that connection piece is huge to me, but then hopefully I'm planting little seeds, right? Like I can't see the, what's the word I'm looking for? I may never know how I impacted them, with the education that I provided, but hopefully I am planting seeds and helping them make some healthier choices the older they grow. Also then, working one-on-one with clients, that's more of a coaching perspective. And again, very much a relationship there, right? You know how that works. And I think, again, making those connections, and sometimes it's not about the food. Right? As much as you come to us for advice on food specifically, we discover that it's not about the food. It's everything else around it. And sometimes it just takes listening skills, right? And again, that connection and that trust with the coach to have that relationship again. So again, just to reiterate, those relationships, those connections, I think are more important than anything else for me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's more of like a foundational piece, right? Because, and it was funny too. I just had a conversation about this with another guest on the show about, and he's a, professional baseball player. And I asked him like, so, what is important for you as far as you working with coaches or any other, like, even like a registered dietitian who's on the team, who's employed by the team? And he said the same thing, relationships. He's like, if I know that my coaches or the staff are there for me, and, then it's everything's going to work out well, and not so much like, oh, you have to do this and that, right? Where it's just a very business, very cold, and so I think with any I think it's across the board, right? Where any industry, any profession in which you're working with people, right? I think that relationship building is so key, and so it's foundational to everything else, because that makes everything else a little bit easier when you're able to build a relationship, get to know the person, just like with you, right? Like, I'm sure you get to know, all your clients, even, your new students, right? And then from there, it just kind of like, once you get going, then all the other stuff, it's just the content and the knowledge is just building on that foundation, right?
Yeah, totally. They always say you want to meet, or in terms of education, I guess, they say meet your clients where they're at. Well, I don't think you can't do that unless you get to know them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Learn what they're struggling with, what they do really good at, or what they do really well, learning what their strengths are and trying to work off of that. So again, taking time to kind of get to know those people.
Sure. Yeah, and that's why I love, seeing, being able to talk with you before about even with my health journey and learning more about that, and following you on your social media and stuff you put out, which is great. Now, one thing I wanted to talk with you about is very unique, that I don't really hear it too much, and that's a part of the reason why I want to bring you on is to talk about the stuff you're putting out with DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid, for those of you. No, it's DNA, right? So like, and talk to me about that. Talk to me how that is, how you're kind of, immersed in that, well, in a sense, it's the same thing, but how are you kind of, kind of pairing, DNA with the work you're doing with nutrition?
Okay, so I'm going to back step a little bit about how I got into it too.
Sure.
So, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of my experience is in clinical nutrition. So I spent a lot of time working in the hospitals. And in clinical nutrition, you kind of have to do this swapping, right? You have to look at their medications. You have to look at their labs and being able to read and interpret those labs and see what they're telling you. And then put together this cure plan, right? Like what kind of nutrients do they need? And it was I think, a very simplistic mind back there. Now it's a little bit more complex. Well, when I left my corporate job to do primarily coaching, over the years, I started to miss the clinical nutrition part of it. Like, I love the sleuthing part. I love figuring out, like, why is this not working? And so there's a functional nutrition, is what it's called, aspect to dietetics. And so I started to explore that. And with that exploration, and they brought about genetics. And it was really kind of ironic because I have a teenage son, actually, and we were visiting in the car, and he was sharing that he was learning about genetics more in agriculture at the time. And he was kind of mesmerized by that. And it kind of caught my ear, and the timing, I think, was kind of perfect. So anyhow, about close to 2 years now since that kind of journey began, I started kind of studying the world of nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics. You'll hear those words kind of used interchangeably, but they do say, anywhere from 18 months of training before you feel like you're a qualified clinician in terms of looking at these tests. They are fairly new. Again, you won't find a doctor probably that is available or educated enough to, or trained, I should say. He's probably educated for sure, but trained to read and interpret these tests. So again, I still consider myself an entry-level person into the world of nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics, but it's very, very exciting. So what kind of questions do you think that, you've seen my social media, so what are some of the things that are spurring your interest?
So if I were to ask, again, this comes down to the right information, right? As far as, because there are people out there who think like health, nutrition, weight loss, it's all just what we eat and what we don't eat. They think it's a simple equation of eat less and you lose weight, and that there's no other factor, right? So like, where does genetics come to play with all this stuff? Like, just to start off, and how it might impact, any portion of health, or even like, things like weight loss, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When I first actually started studying, I was like, this is silly. Like, why would someone do this test? Because, we can look at family history, we can look at medical history, and we can kind of get an idea. And at the beginning, I didn't feel like our interventions were changing. So even knowing the results of our tests, like, do our interventions for our patients and clients, will those really change? But as time has gone on and as I gain more knowledge, I do feel like one of the biggest things is saving the time and the headache on the trial and error part, right? Like, okay, it does take time. Part of any change process when it comes to nutrition, it takes time, right? To build those habits, whether you're wanting to change some of your eating habits or decrease your fat intake for your heart health or your blood pressure or something like that, it takes time for those results to see. So that part is still very much at play. But the one thing, like I said, a genetic test can do is take some of that trial and error out. And so it can save a little bit of time, because now we know what targeted interventions we can use based on your genetic results, or targeted supplementation that will work well with your biochemistry.
Got it. So can you give me an example of that? So say that you're working with, we'll start with this. You're working with a regular 9 to 5 average Joe who says, yeah, I want to I've been wanting to lose weight. I want to be healthy. I'm having some health issues, a little bit high blood pressure, a little bit of cholesterol. My doctor said I'm pre-diabetic, right? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which are unfortunately very common, right? So, so what would be like the treatment plan, or like how would you approach that, like that kind of like average Joe kind of person?
Definitely asking for sure, what does he or she want to get from the results? What does she want to learn from this report? And again, meeting them where they're at,
Sure.
because the report is very full. But if he does come with me with those kind of questions, we have pathways within there that are looking at cardiovascular type pathways and vascular health, and glucose and insulin. And we can look for genetic variations within his genes to see if they're working efficiently or not. So, it can indicate what types of fats he does better with, right? It can indicate, maybe he does better on a keto type diet, and backing off the carbs, as opposed to, again, taking away the carbs and you feel like horrible, you lose all enjoyment of life when you take away the carbs sometimes. But again, you can look at the types of qualities of fat. You can look at, how carbohydrates, how you're utilizing those carbohydrates. I'm trying to think. Oh, some little seeds of information you can find in there that maybe your body doesn't. I'm trying to find the right words here. Your body doesn't utilize aspirin or ACE inhibitors or certain medications that you're on, right? And so you're taking these medications and you're not getting the results. Well, it could be because your genes don't process those, metabolize those like one would normally think so. So again, trial and error, right? Do you want to go through that process, or immediately? And the tests aren't cheap, right? So it is something you're definitely, like an HSA or a health savings account can definitely cover those costs. But again, I think it can give you insights. Another example I had with a client, very struggling with weight loss, and struggling to see results. Well, we possibly uncovered they had the gene for gluten, not diagnostic tests. So none of these tests are diagnostic. They can't actually diagnose someone with celiac, but it does raise a flag and say, hey, look at me, I have this gene. And so I need further testing. So, I refer them back to their doctor and say, hey, go ask some questions here, see if you can find out a little more information. Because if that person does have celiac, and taking gluten out of their diet could change a whole host of outcomes that they've been struggling with, that they haven't been seeing the results with.
Sure. Yeah, because people, a lot of people don't know that, right? A lot of people don't even think to check out that stuff, right? They
Yeah,
just, again, I would say the majority of people, they think it's just a matter of what we eat and eat less or eat more. If we eat more, we're going to gain weight. If we eat less, we'll lose weight, and um, that's where the educational part comes into play. Even
yeah,
myself, I've worked with many athletes, high, performers. I've been an athlete myself, but like I was never really taught this stuff. I mean, even in school systems. I mean, I'm not sure how it is in Nebraska, but growing up, I maybe had like a half of a semester of like the health class, and usually that was taught by like the head football coach, like and so I mean, and so what I'm saying is that the educational part and the knowledge about all this stuff, I'm kind of seeing it go by the wayside in a lot of these different school districts, and I think that's unfortunate. And that's why I really love to hear that you're working with the younger population, because that's where it starts.
it
That's where
does.
these habits start, right? For better or for worse.
Yes.
And when you have someone who grows up in a family or a certain culture, and I know because I've seen this even in the couple of cultures that I'm a part of, is that like it's the habits, it's like generational, right? And this is where you have people like generation after generation who are diabetic, who have high blood pressure, just and just overweight, and just because the cycle continues, right? Because people
Mhm.
don't know, right? And so now, of course, the knowledge is one thing, and the action is taken, that's another thing, right? People can know what's best for them, but what they do with that knowledge is up to them. But a lot of people don't even have that knowledge part, and so they're going to go with what they're going to cook the way their mom or their grandma cooked, right? Or how their dad cooked, and what they put in front of the table, and that's how it goes. And again, that can be for better or for worse, right? If you're and I've seen it. I've seen like my older generation family members who they cook with lard all the time, and it's no shock, no surprise that there's some health issues going on with them. And so that's why I appreciate get those kids early. And I think because you see all these different things as far as in the school systems, how they're taking away, whether it's like or either taking away or not even addressing it at all. Things like knowledge about nutrition and different types of foods, and or the more applicable studies compared to stuff, just stuff that's based towards getting good test scores, for the standardized the state
Yeah.
testing, what I'm saying. So
Yes.
but but that's why I'm glad you're able to bring that up, because that's that knowledge is everything. I think that's where it starts.
Yeah. A couple things that you mentioned there. A lot of people or a lot of influencers, I will even say practitioners will, I refer to them as blanket statements. For example, take gluten and dairy out of your diet because it's inflammatory. Doing this for their whole client population, right? Or their whole patient population. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Again, that's not meeting someone where they're at.
Hmm.
We're also, again, especially the genetic testing can give us insights and clues there. However, it may be very difficult for someone, and the compliance rate to take out dairy and gluten may be very difficult. And then thirdly, that might not be the issue at all. So why put them through that difficulty of removing very prominent food groups from their diet when, again, they don't need that? So
Hmm.
blanket statements, if you hear a blanket statement of do this, red flag right there. The other thing you mentioned, you were kind of talking about intergenerational, and cultural, and things that continue on throughout cultures and generations, and some of those practices around food. Very, very common. And we can look at that too. So you can see some of your genetic history. Our genes are not our destiny. So even though you get this report and you're like, you're depressed from the results, it doesn't mean that you can't change, right? So there's also something that we have that we call epigenetics. And for simplest terms, I like to call that the choices that we make, right? So our environment, our choices, whether that's to eat healthy food or not healthy food, or to smoke or not to smoke, or to sit on our butts and do nothing, or to be active, those all have very powerful effects on how our DNA, how our genes work. So again, like you said, you see your family growing up and using lard, but that doesn't mean you have to, right?
Yeah.
You can make a different choice and maybe switch to olive oil,
Sure.
and you'll see your genes change,
Yeah.
and how they respond to that, and get a totally different health outcome. Just
Absolutely.
as an example. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 2 thoughts when you were talking there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, some people can be that thing that breaks that chain, right? That person that decides to say, you know what, I'm seeing a pattern of like poor health among my family members, and maybe there's something there that I should be doing better, and that it takes that one person to kind of change that trajectory, and now they're showing their kids how to eat healthy and how to eat that balanced plate, the difference between the good carbs, the bad carbs, and all that stuff that that you share with me, that knowledge. And then that they could teach their kids and their family members and their inner circles, and that's where it starts, right? And it just takes that one person to break that cycle, and because you see how people they model behavior, as kids. They see certain things for whatever that behavior is, they model that behavior, and so those behaviors, for better or for worse, can make a difference. So now, one thing that I know a lot of people are always curious about, right? And you did bring it up a little bit, so I wanted to touch on it. Are the diets that are out there, the diets that have been out there? The trendy ones, the ketos, the Atkins, all these, so talk to me about those. Are these something that are certain diets? And I did love the fact that you brought up how meeting with your client where they are, because I take the same approach with my clients and the athletes I work with and the other populations too, because I get asked this a lot. It's like how are you going to help me or help my kid? I don't have a cookie cutter way of helping people. I have my little bag of tools here right at the ready, and like whatever I feel is necessary, I'll bring out, right? But so I did want to say I appreciate that, but I wanted to ask like about that, because as far as diets, because you see all this stuff, especially on social media, about people, keto is still the main one right now, I would say. But talk to me about that. Like, what are your thoughts on all these different diets that have been around for almost decades?
I think one of the reasons that really drew me to genetic testing too was the ability to personalize my recommendations onto a whole new level, right? So again, I would say probably 99% of the clients that I see have tried all those diets, right? And they have not gotten the results that they wanted. So it's really, I'm not opposed either for people to try those diets under my supervision, because for one thing, I think if I don't allow them to try, they will not listen to what I have to say. And when our relationship ends, they'll go try it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So if they want to try keto or carb cycling or intermittent fasting, under my supervision, I'll say, let's do it. Let's try it out for a couple weeks. Let's see what you learn from this and what, to see if you can sustain this. Because I think that's the biggest part is these diets that are out there are fads. I don't think they're sustainable type diets. So again, however, maybe they find through keto that they don't need as many carbohydrates as that have told themselves or believed. Maybe they've realized how to utilize more vegetables in their diet. So there are things that they can learn from these diets. However, having someone to be able to see that, because sometimes, when you're in the thick of things, you can't see around you. And that's what a coach can help you with, right? To pull some of those nuggets of wisdom out of there and really bring them into light. So, showing how to prepare vegetables a little bit. Then you start to find this diet, I hate diet. I hate the word diet because it has such a negative connotation.
Uh-huh.
But you start to formulate what works best for them, right? Definitely, again, using the science, not taking, a woman who is, in her reproductive years and put her on an intermittent fasting diet, right? Like the research is showing, or even a perimenopausal woman, that intermittent fasting creates too much of a stress response. So again, using some of the knowledge and saying, no, we're not going to do that, even though you want to try it, and this is why, right? And being able to explain that. So again, I think it's more about listening to what the client has done, has been through, their experiences. We're hearing what they want, and again, packaging that into something that really works for them, individualize, personalize that for them. And I always talk about it kind of making it, I don't like the word rules, because then I think rules are meant to be broken, but kind of a guidebook, right?
Yeah.
And even though that guidebook is working now, I think we also have to not necessarily warn them, but prepare them that this is working now. Life changes, at the drop of a hat. Seasons change, and what's working now, you still may have to edit, months, years down the road to that season of life.
Absolutely. And we talked about this, and I mentioned a couple of times, but as far as knowing what to eat, how much of it, knowing the difference, right? I know, like, something I always remember working with you is like having a balanced plate, having that, so for those who don't know, and and you can even compare and contrast if you want, and please do, what that might look like for the average working person versus someone who is maybe a higher performer, like an elite athlete, for example, who might need a little bit more of that energy compared to someone who maybe, again, 9 to 5 job, or maybe they go to the gym here and there, right? So like, what is something, I know everyone's different, right? But like, what would you say would be a good balanced play for the average person?
So we don't, for one, we don't do meal plans. We work more with what we call meal templates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So protein, a quarter of your plate, we always want to go to protein, non-negotiable. We need to prioritize protein. We don't want to skimp on protein. Next, fruits and vegetables, right? The color to your plate. We want, for the average American, we want at least half your plate going to fruits and vegetables. So not only are they very nutrient dense, right, but they're also full of phytochemicals and bioactives that can turn our genes on or off. And so they definitely have a purpose and are typically under-eaten or under-consumed here in America. And then the last quarter of that plate goes to carbohydrates. Again, where you and I maybe are sedentary most of the day because we're stuck at our desk jobs, carbohydrates are the main macronutrient, in my opinion, that you can manipulate based on your activity levels. So if we want to flip the script and go to a high-performing athlete who's maybe competing, right, they need lots of energy to be able to utilize and burn through. So those carbohydrates may shift to half your plate, okay? I don't want to underestimate the power of the micronutrients coming from our fruits and vegetables. So they're still always on the plate. And there will be times within that athlete's day that they do shift to more of half that plate. But definitely carbohydrates around those workouts, even for you and I who want to work out, have a good workout, making sure we fuel appropriately around those workouts can help our performance as well.
Absolutely. A lot of good stuff today, Angie. I know you're still putting stuff out, and that's why I want to give you opportunity to bring you on here, to share your wealth of knowledge. And again, I know there's more in there that you have for the people. So if anyone did want to either get a hold of you to ask you questions, or just to kind of follow your journey and follow listen to the stuff that you put out there, like, what would be the best way to do that?
I am honestly most active on Instagram.
Okay.
So it is eAthlete. So E stands for everyday and elite athlete. So eAthlete_nutrition on IG. And again, you can find me in the DMs. You can comment on my post there. I do have a website, eathletenutrition.com. It's actually more geared for, and I didn't mention this, I have a high school curriculum that I developed, a performance nutrition curriculum, so very athletic based there, but it can definitely, kids have to perform in the classroom too. So nutrition, like you mentioned, with standardized testing, nutrition plays a role. So my website is a little more geared to providing that digital high school performance nutrition curriculum. And a little bit, there's some offerings there too for small colleges and universities that don't have the nutrition don't have the budget, right,
Sure.
for a big nutrition program. So they can find me there too, and there's some contact buttons there, but definitely more on Instagram.
Got it. All right, Angie. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on today. I definitely feel like I know the listeners are going to gain a lot of value and knowledge from you. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yes, thank you. It was great. I enjoyed it.
Likewise. So yeah, thank you to my special guest, Angie Katzberg. Follow her, give her a follow. If you like what you saw with the show, click on the little button below, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family. Thank you again for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good one.